Chapter 9. Michael heard the phone ringing as he trudged down the hall towards his apartment. He briefly considered making a dash for the phone, but it was late, and he was too damn tired. That's what answering machines were made for. He had to wonder, though, who was calling him in the wee hours of the morning? Had one of his friends back in the States forgotten about the 6-hour time difference between Long Island and Budapest? Probably just a wrong number, he figured. Or maybe Nicholas wanted him to work in an extra shift. No way, he thought. Between the bloodbath in the underground and the not-quite full-moon madness in the ER, he had paid his dues for the evening. All he wanted now was a couple hours of unbroken sleep. His groggy eyes widened in surprise, however, as he found the front door to his apartment ajar. What the hell? He wondered, even as his answering machine finally kicked into gear. Michael heard his own voice, oddly distorted by the cheap electronic device, issue from the darkened apartment. Hey, this is Michael. You know what to do. The greeting was delivered first in English, then repeated in somewhat shakier Hungarian, while the real Michael cautiously entered his defenseless apartment. I don't frickin' believe this, he thought, an exasperation. First, the shootout? Now this? Was he interrupting a burglary in progress? Or had the perpetrators already fled the scene? Michael fervently rooted for the latter scenario. After all, it wasn't as if he had anything worth stealing. The answering machine beeped loudly, and Michael froze in his tracks as the machine recorded a frantic message. Hey, Mike, it's Adam. Michael heard, an uncharacteristic degree of anxiety in his friend's voice. Look, the police were just in here looking for you, and, I've got a definite impression that they're convinced you were involved in the shootout. I told them there was no way you'd be mixed up in... The police? Michael reacted in surprise. A second before a shadow exploded from the darkness and viciously slammed Michael against the wall, pinning him there. He glimpsed a feminine face, obscured by the darkness. Powerful fingers, amazingly strong, gripped his throat tightly. A cold, hard voice demanded answers. Who are you? Why are they after you? Michael was too shocked and bewildered to reply. He glanced down and was startled to see that his feet were a good 6 inches off the floor. How is that even possible? He wondered, dumbfounded. Who the hell is this? Darth Vader? His assailant leaned forward and shaft of a light from the hallway exposed her face, and he was stunned to see that it belonged to that gorgeous dark-haired woman from the subway station. Recognition flooded his face. You! Before he could even process what was happening, the entire apartment trembled, plaster rained down from the ceiling as 3 heavy objects landed on the roof. Huh? He thought, unable to keep up with the flood of unexpected jolts. What just smacked down on the roof? Hissing like a cat, the mystery woman let go of Michael, dropping him back into the floor, and drew a lethal-looking automatic pistol from beneath the folds of her black leather trench coat. Without a moment's hesitation, she unloaded an entire clip into the ceiling. Michael's ears rang with explosive thunder of automatic weapons fire. Her high-caliber assault on the ceiling provoked a chorus of ferocious roars from whoever, or whatever, was on the roof. Shaking like a leaf, Michael wasn't sure what terrified him more, the blaring gunfire or the horrendous howls. Stay down, the woman shouted at him. Screw that, Michael thought, and bolted for the door. Unlike Michael, Celine knew exactly what was on the roof. Expert ears recognized the monstrous tread of 3 fully transformed werewolves. They must be desperate to get Corvin, she realized, if they're willing to reveal their beast form so readily. Her trusty Beretta discharged an empty clip, and she hastily reloaded before turning to check on the baffled human, who so far had shown no sign of understanding what was happening. To her dismay, she found herself alone in the apartment. Michael Corvin was gone. Damn! She cursed in frustration. She raced out of the apartment into the hall, just in time to see a pair of elevator doors closing on Corvin. He was getting away. Wood and glass exploded to her right as one after the other, 3 snarling werewolves burst through the fire escape window. At the far end of the hall, fangs bared, cobalt eyes gleaming, they bounded down the dimly lit corridor, heading straight for her. Foam dripped from their frothing jaws. Celine looked hurriedly for an exit. Alas, the other end of the hallway ended in a closed apartment door. Worse still, the only stairs were at the opposite end of the corridor, beyond the charging werewolves. She was trapped, Or was she? Thinking quickly, she opened fire on the rampaging beast while simultaneously yanking on a second Beretta from her belt. The barrage of silver bullets barely slowed the ravening werewolves. They were in a berserker fury now, and nothing short of a clean kill was going to stop them. There was no way she could take out all three wolves before one or more of them tore her apart. Time for a quick getaway. Spinning on her heels, she fired at the floor with her second gun, tracing a circular pattern around her boots. With automatic fury, splinters flew wildly around her ankles, and a jagged hole opened up beneath her. Gravity seized her, and she dropped through the gap to the next floor down, landing hard in a dusty avalanche of shredded wood and carpet. She glanced quickly at the elevator, only to see it bypass the floor, heading towards the lobby. Great, she thought sarcastically. Colvin was still getting away from her. She whirled around towards the stairwell, her only escape route. It was at the far end of the hall, approximately 30 paces away. If she hurried, maybe she could still elude the werewolves and beat Colvin to the ground floor. A deafening roar sounded overhead, and a fearsome claw reached through the gaping hole in the ceiling. Celine ducked just in time, barely escaping decapitation. She fired back at the werewolves, strafing the ceiling with red-hot silver as she scrambled for the stairs. The narrow hallway turned into a hellish gauntlet as yet more lycanthropic arms came thrusting through the ceiling, seeking to snag her before she reached the safety of the stairs. Sparks flew around her from the fractured light fixtures, and knife-like claws raked the air around her. The clamour of howling werewolves awoke the sleeping apartment building. Celine heard clumsy stirrings and fearful exclamations coming from behind the flimsy plywood doors. A lupine paw grabbed her long brown hair, the points of its bony claws brushing against her scalp, and Celine put on a burst of speed, tearing herself free from the creature's murderous grasp. That was close, she realised, wishing she had a full cadre of death dealers on hand to back her up. The odds against her were 3-1, or worse. Maybe coming after Corvin herself hadn't been such a bright idea. Inside the elevator, Michael cringed at the thunderous growls and gunshots penetrating the dubious security of the descending metal compartment. His anxious brown eyes tracked his progress towards the lobby as he wheeled the creaky elevator to great speed. His distraught mind worked feverishly to make sense of it all. Who was that woman, and what were those animals on the roof? It sounds like a jungle safari gone wrong out here, he thought, feeling as though he was trapped in a particularly incoherent nightmare. Shootouts in subways were one thing. That was just modern urban warfare in the early 21st century. Nasty, but not unprecedented. But a leather-clad super babe blasting away at the roof, prowling beasts in her own apartment at 6 o'clock in the morning? Where the heck had that come from, and what did it have to do with him? The elevator bumped to a stop on the ground floor, and Michael expelled a gasp of relief. Come on, he muttered, waiting endlessly for his sealed car to release him. His sneakers tapped impatiently on the floor until the metal doors finally opened, to reveal a stranger waiting in the lobby. Hello, Michael, the man said, speaking English with a crisp British accent. A slight bearded man, maybe 35 years old, with cunning grey eyes and shoulder-length black hair, the stranger stood calmly in front of the elevator, his hand clasped behind him, much like a gun-wielding Amazon who had invaded Michael's apartment. The nameless individual wore a long brown coat over equally dark attire, including a pair of dark brown gloves. A gleaming metal amulet dangled around his neck. He smiled at Michael with teeth that seemed altogether too white and sharp. As far as Michael knew, he had never seen this person before, not even in the subway earlier. Before either of the men could say another word, shots suddenly rang out of the lobby. The stranger stiffened as the bullet struck his body. Another shot grazed his right temple, opening a bloody gash alongside of his skull. Startled by the impact, the wounded man dived into the elevator, knocking Michael over as he did so. They hit the floor hard, the jolt knocking the wind out of Michael. He found himself lying flat on his back, tangled in a jumble with the other man. Rivets of dark red blood streamed down from the stranger's face as he instinctively reached for his head. He grimaced in pain, looking more pissed than afraid. Who the heck is this dude? Michael thought strangely. He was more scared of the gunshot victim than for him. And who is shooting at us? Looking up past the injured man's shoulder, Michael saw the woman from his apartment suddenly appearing in the doorway of the elevator. She thrust her smoking pistols into her belt as she ducked down and grabbed hold of Michael's leg. Once again, he was caught off guard by the astounding strength of her grip. Tugging on his ankle, she effortlessly dragged him across the floor of the elevator towards the lobby beyond. Before she could pull him completely clear, however, The other man lunged at him like a blood-soaked demon, sinking his teeth into Michael's shoulder. "Shit! He bit me!" He yelped in shock, feeling razor-sharp incisors slice deeply into his flesh. But the strength of the mystery woman was too powerful to be denied. In an instant, he was yanked away from the piercing fangs into the lobby of his apartment building, where she rapidly jerked him to his feet, blood gashed from his punctured shoulder, but the leather-clad mystery woman seemed in too much of a hurry to notice. Grabbing him by the waist, she dragged Michael with her as she raced for the door, leading to the grimy alley outside. Michael didn't even try to resist. He was just as eager to get away from the psycho in the elevator as she was. She kicked the front door open, and they hastily fled the building. The rain was coming down hard again, pelting the hood of the snazzy silver Jaguar parked right outside. "Nice wheels," he thought absurdly, as she threw open the passenger door and shoved him inside. Lucian's mouth was filled with the human's blood, still sprawled on the floor of the elevator. The injured Lycan resisted the urge to swallow the hot, tangy fluid. Instead, he groped about in his pocket until he retrieved a tiny glass vial, which had somehow miraculously survived the vampire's attack. Uncapping the vial, he spit a mouthful of fresh blood into the sterile glass receptacle. Mission accomplished, he thought coolly. Still, he couldn't allow Michael Corwin to fall into the hands of the vampires. Not if the American was indeed the one they sought. Even if the bloodsuckers were unaware of Corvin's potential significance, Lucian had waited too long to let any candidate slip from his clutches. First, though, he had to do something about the wretched Silver. The vampire's bullets burned hellishly within his flesh. Unless he rid himself of the present soon, the poison would spread throughout his system, killing him just as surely as if the female vampire had sliced off his head. The caustic taint of the Silver blazed like acid beneath his skin. He climbed to his feet, ignoring the throbbing agony, and ripped open his shirt. A trail of gaping entry wounds riddled his chest, enough to kill any ordinary man or lycanthrope. Lucian counted at least half a dozen bullet holes. This isn't going to be easy, he realized. He took a deep breath and stared at the ceiling. A look of intense concentration came over his blood-stained face as he closed his eyes and focused on expelling the poison from his body. Straining muscles rippled beneath his skin, while the tendons in his neck stood out tautly like steel cords. Blood pounded at his temples. His jaws clenched as tightly as his fists. At first, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the yawning wounds contracted, disgorging warped silver slugs in what looked like a grotesque mockery of the miracle of birth. A single blood-red bullet clattered into the floor of the elevator, followed by a string of identical pellets hitting the ground. Lucian's ashen face remained a mask of utter concentration. It had taken him centuries to master this trick, and even now it required all his mental energy and discipline. Agonizing hours seemed to pass, but in fact it took him only a matter of minutes to extrude every trace of silver from his immortal form. He let out an exhausted gasp, and his shoulders slumped with released tension, as the last silver projectile clinked to the floor. Now then, he thought, licking the last of Michael's blood from his teeth. Time to catch up with Mr. Corvin and that trigger-happy vampire bitch. What the fuck is going on? Michael demanded, strapped into the passenger seat of the sleek silver Jag. He didn't know he was being kidnapped or rescued or both. The mystery woman ignored his frantic query, putting the pedal to the metal. She sent the Jag screeching out of the alley. The sudden acceleration threw Michael's back against his seat, silencing him for a moment. He whipped his head around, peering back through the Jag's rear window at the apartment building, his home away from home in Budapest, and was shocked to see the lunatic from the elevator come striding out of the lobby, blood dripping from his forehead and bare chest. What the fuck? Michael thought, flabbergasted. His shoulder stung like hell where the bloodthirsty Brit had bit him. I thought she shot him full of bullets. The stranger sure didn't look like a man who had just suffered multiple gunshots. Spotting the Jaguar, he raced after it with impossible speed. This can't be happening, Michael thought in stunned disbelief. The blood-streaked madman was actually gaining on the sports car, as if he was the $6 zillion man or something. Michael's jaw dropped as the carnivorous stranger pounced at the car like a wild beast, leaping through the rain as though jet-propelled. Crunch! The pursuer crashed onto the trunk of the Jag, causing both Michael and the mystery woman to start forward in their seats. Michael's eyes bulged from their sockets as he watched an indefatigable stranger scramble up the back of the car onto the roof. Never mind the wind or the rain, or the fact that Jag was going at least 60 miles per hour. This was getting more insane by the second. Who are these people? Michael wondered desperately. And what do they want from me? The rain-slick metal was cold and slippery, but Lucian's powerful fangs found purchase anyway. Digging into the bonded aluminum with claw-like nails that were several centimeters longer than he had a second while ago, it would take more than bad weather to cheat him of his prize. Not after all the centuries he'd spent plotting and planning his revenge against the vampires. Michael Corvin might well be the key to Lucian's ultimate victory, and he wasn't about to let some slinky vampire minx abscond the hapless American. The icy wind hurled the rain against his face, washing away most of the blood from his head wound, as Lucian clambered up the back of the car onto the roof. His long black hair whipped back and forth in the gale. His left hand held on tightly to the chrome trim on the left side of the roof, while he reared back in fury and raised his clenched right fist. Shashank! A black carbon steel blade, double-edged and 30 centimeters long, snapped out of his sleeve with a spring-loaded force. Who needs to transform, he thought, wearily, when you've got modern technology on your side? Michael stared in fear and confusion at the roof of the Jaguar. He couldn't see the bloodthirsty, seemingly indestructible stranger anymore, but Michael knew the other man was up there, only inches above their heads. He suddenly recalled the heavy Watsits landings on the roof of the apartment building, right before he ran like a crazy out of his apartment. Had that only been 5 or 10 minutes ago? It was hard to believe. Everything was happening way too fast, and Michael held his breath, fearful and uncertain about what was coming next. What could the stranger do to them, up on the top of the car, as he was? Something bad, Michael guessed, none too eager to find out. Something really, really bad. A sharp black knife thrusting through the metal of the roof of the accelerating Jaguar fulfilled his dire expectations. The double-edged blade stabbed repeatedly through the rooftop over the driver's seat, trying to skewer the unknown woman behind the wheel. "Watch out!" Michael shouted too late. The blade found its mark, sliding all the way through the woman's shoulder. She yelped in shock when slammed on the brakes, which scored like banshees as the Jag abruptly screeched to a halt. Michael thanked God for his seatbelts, which were all then kept him from flying headfirst through the rain-streaked windshield. Their attacker was not so lucky. The sudden stop catapulted him off the roof of the car. Michael watched with eyes agog as the madman hit the street, rolling into a stop several yards in the front of the car. He lay face down on the rain-drenched cobblestones. Michael feared that the man was seriously injured until he raised his head and started to get up. What was it going to take to stop this guy? Blood streaming from her impaled shoulder, the woman floored the gas pedal. The Jag lunged forward, heading straight for the stranger, who was already clambering back onto his feet. The tires scored against the wet pavement. "No!" Michael yelled instinctively. The Jag slammed into the stranger with a sickening thud, launching him into orbit. The car hit Lucian head-on, its front end striking his entire body from the shoulders down. The force of the collision shattered his ribs and knocked the breath out of his body. Against his will, his feet left the pavement as he tumbled towards the moonlit sky. An ordinary human would be unconscious already, if not dead on impact. But Lucian, a pure-born lycanthrope, was not human, and never had been. Although fundamentally more canine than feline, he twisted in the air like a panther, landing on his feet many meters behind the female vampire's speeding sports car. Dark eyes smouldering with stringently controlled rage as he watched the Jaguar's tail lights pull away from him, disappearing into the night. That had to be Celine, he guessed, recalling from the familiar reputation of a certain infamous female death dealer. His mole inside vampire coven often had spoken of Celine and her intense hatred of all things Lycan. Lucian had suspected that their paths would cross someday, but this was not exactly the outcome he intended. He sniffed the air, smelling the vampire's cold blood upon his blade. The black knife retracted into his sleeve with a metallic click. Gloved fists clenched in frustration. Fractured ribs began to re-knit themselves painfully. Lucian had scored the first blood against Celine, yet somehow she had escaped with his prize. Not for long, he vowed. Michael Corvin was too important to his plans. Lucian checked his pocket, and was relieved to discover that the precious vial of blood had survived his close encounter with the Jaguar's front end. A partial victory, then, he concluded. He had the human's blood. That would have to do for now.